Hey, Carmen, did you get Charles out of the hospital yesterday?
Uh, he's in Eagle Lake Hospital for 10 days.
Oh, my word. I didn't realize that. Did you get Charles out of the hospital yesterday? Gonna turn that off. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he has to continue. They had to transfer him from there. They got him all, I don't know, found out what the problem was, got him started. The infectious disease doctor saw him, and then what they do is transfer you to a facility to continue called skilled nursing or something to and so he chose Eagle Lake, and so I got him there Saturday. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize there was a hospital in Eagle Lake, but
Yeah.
okay.
They transferred him there. The only way we knew that was once in Columbus, he had the same situation. He had to continue strong antibiotics and in wound clinic back when he was having problems with his legs. And
Hmm.
so they sent him to Eagle Lake Wound Clinic, and it's an inpatient, and they had him on strong antibiotics there. So,
Okay. Well, we'll just have to
yeah,
keep on praying for him.
yeah.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. Your sweet potatoes was delicious.
Delicious.
Off the hook. I want more. I'm gonna come rob you.
Well, that's good. That was seemed like that was a hit. Every once in a while, I experiment with something new
Very
in the
good.
garden, and some of them are just absolutely um, out of this world failures.
Not these. Not these.
So yeah, that I grew some stuff this last year called Jerusalem artichokes, and so they're just not worth the trouble. They what it makes is little tubers in the ground, and you have to pull them up and then wash them all. But they're you know what ginger root looks like.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's what these things look like. So they got dirt all over them, and you got to get the dirt out of the little cracks and crevices and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just now and another name that they have for the things, the Jerusalem artichokes, is Jerusalem fartichokes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'll
So
skip on that one.
they got a chemical in them that they're called inulin that many people cannot digest well,
Okay.
and so it
So it makes you fart.
yep, yep, it
Anyway,
does. It does. They will cause a great deal of flatulence. So we tried eating them one time, and I said, well, I think that'll be the end of it. I may try to dig some of them up and ferment them. Put them in a brine or something like that and ferment
right.
them and see what. Because one person online said that fermenting them does cut way back on that problem. So we'll try it and see.
Well,
But
these were delish. No question
Yeah,
about
we
it.
loved them.
Yeah, no question about it.
well, that's good. That's good because that's what I came home yesterday afternoon after service, and that's what I cooked up some. Uh, well, see, I do them by frying them. I got a little
Yeah, I
deep
know.
fryer and just
They're
cut
good.
them up real, thin, real thin slices and make little potato chips out of them, and
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
pretty good
yeah.
that way. But yeah, I'm not a fan of sweet potatoes at all, but Pat likes them, so.
I love them.
Yeah, a lot of people do. I don't care for them at all, but she likes them, and so we grew about I don't know over 200 pounds worth that
Dang.
I was able to harvest. And
And cure them.
yeah, and they were, it turns out these things are very resistant to different kind of bugs and stuff that the other sweet potatoes I've had problems with.
Yeah.
And so I'll be growing some more this next year, but of course
Absolutely.
you don't put them in the ground until at least April 15th.
Right. Okay.
And because they
But
got the same with okra, you don't plant okra until at least April 15th
okay.
because it's
Thank you.
got to be warm. Well, glad you liked them. All right, so it's 7:02 and we have we have a minion here, and so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And we'll see. Well, people are still popping in here, and okay, so I don't see any newbies on here tonight. Everybody's oh well. There's one it just says phone. I don't know who that is, and then you're the iPhone. I think that's you and Colette.
Yeah.
Did you just answer that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so then that I'm going to rename you so I'll know who it is. And well, I don't know if I can do that or not. Yeah, I can. Oh no, I can't. It's not letting me do that. So all right. Whatever. Oh, here it is over on this side. All right. Okay, so I think we're ready to go, and let's go ahead and begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. All right. So uh, I'm going to go ahead and you know the rules. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody, and then if you have anything to say, you can just um, unmute yourself and say away. All right, so tonight we're beginning the book of Malachi, and this is the last of our study that started back in September of 2024. So it's a year and a half of going through the minor prophets. I didn't realize it was going to take that long, but we're in no hurry because if we don't finish all of our studies and everything before the second coming, it's not going to be held against us. Trust me on that. Yeshua he'll say, good job, come on in, you're good. So I didn't realize how long it was going to take, and but that's okay. And we'll finish this off in probably the next 2 weeks. And then from there, we're going to go into the book of Jeremiah, or as they say in Jerusalem, Yirmiyahu. Okay. And also, I saw a Warren on here tonight, and I was just thinking about you this morning, Warren. I was wondering if how you getting along up there, and everything is good for you.
Pretty good. I mean, we got dumped on with little bit of snow, and it's cold up here. But yeah, but we're used to it, like
Yeah, yeah. Well,
this is the Northeast. We got snow all the time, so we drive through it and whatnot, and it's like,
yeah, well,
we're
up there, what do you call 10 inches of snow? Not Tuesday.
that's about right.
So, well, good to have you back with us. I was wondering about and hoping that you did not have any health issues. Is why you were not with us. So, good deal.
Well, no, not nothing immediate. Though I developed a post-operative hernia that needs to be addressed. So I have to get a CT scan for that and see the surgeon, the general surgeon, to probably repair that hernia. But other than that, that's it. It should be just a routine type of deal, hopefully.
Yeah, well, that's good. I always figured if it was on somebody else, it could be routine. If it was on me, it's a major disaster.
Yeah, I try to ignore it as much as possible.
Yeah, well, that's the difference. That's the difference between major and minor surgery. If it's on you, it could be minor. If it's on me, man, that's major. I don't like surgery, so.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, I agree. I hear you.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're here. So let's go ahead and get cranking, and we'll see if we actually even get through all the way through chapter 1 tonight. I don't know. So we got here's my handy dandy ubiquitous little timeline, and they've got Malachi somewhere looking at a little over 500 um, BCE to maybe 470, and that is it's just a guess. Nobody knows what the time is. I mean, you got all sorts of different theologians, and they come up with all sorts of differences. And I mean, it is varied. The dates that they come up with varies over 100 years. And so, not unlike a couple of the other minor prophets that tell you, well, on the seventh day of the third month in the reign of Xerxes or Ahasuerus or whatever, where they nailed it down. We could tell it the exact day. We don't see that in Malachi. He's very general, and he doesn't pin anything down. So anyway, so as a historical setting here, um, I think most of the commenters that I read kind of put this thing somewhere around 450 to 430 BCE, and which that just blows my timeline out of the water. So, I don't, it really doesn't make any difference because we know it was post exile, so it had to be after everybody came back and or the people that came back from the Babylonian captivity. And they also, we know that in some of the writings and so forth, that it would have had to been after the temple had been rebuilt and sacrifices had been reinstituted. And so, as the political status here is that Israel was just a weak vassal province of the Persian Empire. They had no king, and Persia, whoever was in charge in Persia, appointed the governor there, whoever was going to run affairs for the Persian government in Israel. And so, but life in Israel was pretty tough. There was let's look at what these people felt, and And they came back with all high hopes. They'd been in captivity for 70 years, and so they came back with these ideas that they're going to come back and rebuild the temple, and everything is going to go back to the some of the prophets had actually talked about a Davidic throne, and they were going to come back to being able to put a descendant of David on the throne. And of course, it didn't happen that way. They got the temple rebuilt, but it was a sad uh, replica of Solomon's temple. It just didn't have the pizzazz that Solomon's temple did, and not only that, they didn't have the Ark of the Covenant. It was somehow spirited away, or they found it, and who knows? Okay, somebody was trying to get in here. Um, but didn't have an Ark of the Covenant, and so that was a problem. And the nations were not streaming into Jerusalem to make Jerusalem wealthy again. All they wanted to do was just pick apart the Israelites that had come back. So these promised blessings that came from Haggai and Zechariah just didn't materialize. They just seemed like that they were delayed, and so as because of that, the people were kind of dismayed over the whole thing. And I don't know if you knew this, but the name of that the Persian Empire called Israel was Yehud, which, probably is associated with the word Yehuda, Jew, or something like that, or Judah, as we would say. All right. So, anyway, this kind of generated a national mood of cynicism and weariness in worship. Like in chapter 2, you'll see where the cynicism. They say, "Well, where is the God of justice?" And here in the first chapter, they come up and say something about the what a burden all of this uh, worship and the sacrifices and all that kind of stuff. What a burden that was. And so they definitely doubted God's love for them. They were just there and just really lethargic, and it just wasn't working out. So they had real problems. And so if you look at their spiritual condition, all right, they had worship going on, but they were just kind of going through the motions, as it were. All right, the the priests, they were offering blemished, sick, or stolen animals. It didn't matter. Just okay. Yeah, you got a lamb. Okay, good enough. What, 3 legs? Well, that's good enough. No worries. And they were supposed to take animals without any blemishes, and they were certainly not doing that. And they pretty much treated the altar with contempt because their sacrifices were not proper sacrifices. And then they talk about how that they showed partiality when people would come to the priests for some kind of adjudication of a problem or something. Then the priest would well, they're gonna go with the guy with the money, So you follow the money, and the rule, the deal about those that the golden rule, that those that have the gold make the rules. That's kind of what went on there. And so, and then with the people themselves, they were not supporting the priesthood like they were supposed to, with their tithes, and the men were divorcing their wives and intermarrying with the much younger non-Jewish or pagan women, and so that became a real problem, and breaking up these marriages that are that were demanded by the Torah, and so they were also involved in injustice. Their judges or their uh, administrators and so forth, they're falling right back into those same old habits that had gotten them into so much trouble uh, 70 years ago or earlier, or however many, by this time maybe about 100 years earlier, when they went into captivity. And so, but the bottom line of all of this is that the people were questioning God. Is there a God? We saw the same kind of a thing after the Holocaust. If there is a God, how could he let this happen to us, his chosen people? So the the economic situation there was not good. In Malachi 3:11, it mentions crop failures, and then they had pest infestations and drought and high taxes that was imposed on them by Persia, and then the land was owned by wealthy elites and leaving many of the people poor. They were struggling to survive, and there again, that kind of fed their spiritual apathy, because if things are not good for them, they're going to just, like a lot of people do. Why would God allow this? And so that's where they were spiritually, and because of the hardship, the economic situation that they were in. So, what about their social conditions? Okay, here we go back into that same stuff that they had before, where it was they oppressed the poor, and because they're easy targets, they did not take care of the widows and orphans. They exploited or cheated the laborers that they had, and the courts were corrupt. And I mean, it did not take Israel very long to fall back into those same uh, evil inclinations that they had before they went into captivity. So this whole idyllic Torah centric uh, society that they thought they were getting into, it just wasn't happening. It was coming apart at the seams. Now their religious life, um, it was temple centric. Okay, they had a temple, they had sacrifices, but like I put here, it was spiritually thin, because they didn't have their heart into it. The even though it was active, they had all their daily sacrifices, and the priests rotated through, and they did everything like it appeared to be, that they should be doing. They observed all of the festivals, but what to say, their heart was missing. They just didn't have a heart for it, because things were just going too tough for them, and their worship it had become mechanical, just routine, I guess, would be a thing that you could say. It was cheap. They tried to get by with the cheapest way they could, when the Bible says to put your best animal there, the one without spot or blemish, and they would just go and buy one, or go steal somebody's lamb and bring it in. They did what was convenient, not what was right, and so. They were doing what they were supposed to on the outside, but it just wasn't on the inside. It would be like people, and we all, maybe we've all been there, where you go to worship on the weekend, whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday. You go there, and the reason that you're going there is because, well, that's what I'm supposed to do, and your heart's not in it, and I can remember the days of wishing that every weekend it would rain so that I wouldn't feel bad about being in church and thinking about, I really would like to be out on my sailboat instead of sitting here. And I don't know. Maybe you guys never had those kind of thoughts sitting in church. Maybe I'd really like to be out on the golf course, but that's kind of the way these people were, and I think maybe we've all been there at one time or another. All right, and in their family life, their married life, it was total breakdown, just a mess, because these Malachi addressed the problem of men divorcing their wives so that they could get a younger, better looking wife that was not Jewish. And of course, the problem with that, we saw it with Solomon. He would get these wives that worship different gods, and then that just the men would have to kind of go along to get along, and um, it was a mess. And so they that idea of assimilation it wasn't just a moral issue that we're talking about here, because it threatened Israel's identity and their future, because once they started diluting the gene pool, I guess you would say, and getting rid of people who were versed in Torah and wanted to practice and observe Torah, and then they marry into with a family situation where the wife had no desire to do that, and so they could make life quite miserable for the average Torah observant Israelite. And so anyway, they it became a real crisis for them. And so the people saw that things were just like they were 70 years or 100 years before. Heck, it may have been the same way in Babylon, where they had their own communities, and so it might have still been having people cheating and so forth. And so they saw the bad guys were always winning, and the guys that tried to play by the rules, they were suffering. And guess what? There was no intervention from God. There wasn't anything that would come down like an earthquake that would make the home of the rich, wealthy, nasty guy crumble and fall into the cracks. It didn't happen. And so they're asking, okay, where is this God of justice? Kind of like in our own world, where we see the Congress critters and other government muckety mucks that do seemingly all sorts of things, and yet they're never called to account for it. Now, Pat and I were just talking about that today, and I don't know which particular politician she was focusing on there, but she said, I would not want to be in their shoes on Judgment Day. And there you go. I mean, it was they're going to get it at that point, but here now we run into that woman that says, at this point, what difference does it make that 4 Americans died and were mutilated and violated? What difference does it make? Well, someday, she'll never face justice in the United States, but she'll face justice in the court of the Messiah. That's for sure. So anyway, it didn't end this first um, this book of Malachi. It doesn't end terribly bad because they do talk about the remnant. God always keeps a remnant. He has a remnant. People who have been faithful. They followed him. They followed the Lord. They feared the Lord. And so it says that they spoke with one another. In other words, they got together. They lifted each other up. They encouraged each other. And it says that God wrote their names in the book of remembrance. So here we have, this is the last book in the Old Testament, and it's kind of a jumping off point into the Messiah coming. And so a lot of people talk about that 400 years from Malachi to Yeshua as being the silent years. Well, it really wasn't the silent year. I mean, that were there any books written or anything like that? No, but God was still talking to his people, and there were a lot of events went on. You know, we had Alexander the Great came in, and God spared Jerusalem because he had a dream, and the high priest had a dream. They got together, and Alexander was so impressed with the high priest that he said, "You guys just don't cause me any trouble. Mind your own business. Go and do your thing over there. I got to be over in Damascus by Thursday, so I'll see you later." And so there he went, into more conquering, and he basically left Israel alone. And so then later on with the Maccabees, you got a bunch of ragtag uh, Jewish fellows with, um, you know, handmade weapons and maybe slings, slingshot kind of a thing. And what did they do? They defeated one of the more powerful armies of that era in combat. Now, it wasn't conventional combat. It was guerrilla warfare, guerrilla tactics, and but still there were times where the victory for Israel was nothing short of just plain miraculous. And so, the idea that that was a silent period, I just I don't go along with it. There were things that were going on with that the Lord was speaking to his people, and they were doing some great things. And so anyway, Malachi is a good jumping off spot um, for the coming of the Messiah. And so if we had a kind of did I put a summary here? Yeah, I did a summary. So if you were living in Israel during Malachi's ministry, okay, that's what you'd have. You'd have a functioning temple, but it was all hat and no cattle. There was nothing spiritual about it. They were just going through the motions. And sometimes, even today in our world, we can go to church or go to synagogue and just go through the motions. And so there was a lot of economic pressure, social injustice. Well, guess what? We got the same thing today. And disappointment that the restoration of the temple and the walls and all that wasn't big, grand, glorious, and it was as good as Solomon's temple. It wasn't. And so the community was kind of drifting off top dead center, and not keeping Torah like they should. The priests were just totally, for the most part, they were failing to lead, and they did not lead the people into a relationship with God. They were just going through the motions. And so then there was a remnant that was mentioned there, and so Malachi is that voice that through and with this remnant calling for renewal. And so again, it's a good bridge between the post-exilic disappointment and the messianic hope that is going to come into play, about 400 years after this was written. So, all right, any comments or questions on the historical introduction to Malachi? All right. So who was this guy named Malachi? We don't know. There's no information in the Bible about his family, his heritage, his birthplace, nothing. And so, and believe it or not, I've got, I guess I read from, I don't know, 4 or 5, through 3 or 4 commentaries on this. And I mean, there were paragraphs written on who they thought this would be, and so, but it was all guesswork. They had no clue and no evidence to support their thought as to who wrote Malachi. And so, what's the word? Why don't you just say, okay, we don't know? That's a lot of people have a problem with saying I don't know. And so anyway, going ahead. And I don't know if I remember mentioning that the word Malachi means the messenger. That's what his name would mean. And a lot of people say, well, his name, that's not a name actually. It was a title, the messenger. And then there were other people that had the idea that, oh no, it could still be a name for somebody. Again, does it matter? No, I don't think it does. All right, so Malachi 1:1. Oh, Joseph, you had
Yes.
yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Usually you give us a name that's different than the way we normally pronounce Malachi. So how is this name pronounced? Don't say
Oh,
Malachi.
it's
It's Malachi. Malachi.
yeah, it's
Now
Okay,
Malachi.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
literally means my messenger. That's the proper way that it would be translated. But it's interesting to note that malach, that word malach, also means angel, and
Yep.
not that it's an angel here, but malach also means angel. But malach, a messenger. Um, every congregation had a person in it known as a malach. He was the person who would read aloud whatever messages or whatever that come before the congregation. He would read it. He was the messenger of for each congregation. And I don't want to step on anybody's toes because I know a lot of people just, when they look at a Greek text, they say, well, it says agalos here. It must absolutely mean angel. Well, when you look at Revelation, this is written by John the apostle. I mean, there's good reason for believing that Paul wrote all his stuff in Greek, and Luke did, of course. And of course, it's absolutely a correct translation of malach to say that it's an angel whenever God commands, right to the angel of Ephesus, right to the angel of Pergamum, but because the word is agalos, but if we're looking at a Hebrew original, which is very, very possible, especially with the revelation of John, it makes a lot more sense to recognize it as right to the Malach, right to the messenger of the church of Ephesus, right to the messenger of the church in Pergamon, right to the messenger in the church of Philippi or whatever, and Pergamum, and it sheds another light on it. Now, I don't want to get into any kind of cause any big ruckus, but when you think about it and realize that there probably was a Hebrew original for that, at least for that one book, it probably Malach as being a messenger probably makes a lot more sense.
There you go. And the idea that, okay, what's in a name? Well, we got three dudes in our congregation named Angel. And are they? No. One's a plumber, one's the plumber's baby, and the other dude, I don't know what he does, but he none of them are angels, you know. So getting into some of that is kind of funny. All right. Malachi 1:1 here says, an oracle, the word of Adonai to Israel by Malachi. And um, the word there for oracle, it's Messiah, and it means in other places it's translated burden, and so it sets the tone for a kind of a sober mood. And so in the prophetic books, the same Hebrew word Messiah, um, it introduces messages of a kind of a threatening nature, and it does it like 27 times. And so where this, it just kind of stands alone at the beginning of Malachi. It kind of gives the whole message maybe a sense of anxiety or foreboding, or like you want the bad news first or the good news first, and that sort of thing. So um, then they also talk about the word of the Lord. Well, here again, this is the word coming right from God, and in the Hebrew, they have Yod He Vav He. Well, of course, we don't pronounce it unless you're a Christian that feels like that you're somehow. I don't know. I'm not going to assign anything to it, but it just seems like that, Jewish people do not try to pronounce the name of God. And uh, there are, many, many of these theologians, seem like every one of them nowadays, they have to have their own, they have a pronunciation and they use it all the time. And so it just, I get kind of tired of it. But anyway, it said that the word that came from the Lord, the Yod He Vav He, and so that authority doesn't get any higher than that. That's the top authority. And then he also names his audience. It was to the people of Israel. This was not written to the nations. Okay. This was written to the people of Israel. And so, anyway, let's go to verses 2 and 3. It says, I loved you, says Adonai, but you say, how have you loved us? Was Esau not Jacob's brother? It is the declaration of Adonai. Yet I loved Jacob and Esau I hated. I made his hills a wasteland and gave his inheritance to jackals of the wilderness. All right, so the Lord, first thing that the Lord says to the people that He's dictating through Malachi uh, was that, hey, you guys, I love you, and it's something that people um, a lot of times they just they'll say it, and or we use it in English. It's well, yeah, I really loved that movie, or I love that kind of ice cream, or I love that, whatever. We use that same word love, and that's so shallow but when God says I loved you, um, that's important, and that's all encompassing, because we know that He loved the world so much that He gave His Son to die for us. Okay, so that's how much love He has. But then they come along and say, "Oh yeah, you love us. Well, how have you loved us?" Because remember, their economic situation, their spiritual situation, their political situation, they are having a rough time of it right now, and so they are of opinion that God has pretty much abandoned us, or maybe he got left over in Babylon, or whatever. Is there really a God? I don't know. It's so terrible. That was their attitude. But um, anyway, he does that. I mean, um, he says, "I have loved you," and then they come along and says, "Oh yeah, how's that happen?" And so it just kind of gives us, they have a spiritual amnesia, I wrote down here. They no longer interpret their history through a covenant lens. They got a short memory, and they don't go back to all of the things and the times where God has supported them over the decades and generations, as it were. And so they have this emotional numbness. Their worship is mechanical, because they have no heart. They can no longer perceive divine love. And of course, then the cynicism comes in. They in this post-exilic community, they expected the glory of the Lord to come back, and you've remembered Ezekiel uh, reported how he saw the glory, the Shekinah, or if you're from East Texas, the Shekinah glory of the Lord, um, leaving the temple. It was gone. There was, when Solomon's temple was, when the tabernacle was instituted, and launched, as I guess you'd say, um, the glory of God was so powerful that nobody could stand there, and they were just all down on the ground with the weight of God's glory. Same thing with Solomon's temple. When that temple worship was inaugurated, the weight of God's glory was so heavy. Well, now you get to the restored temple after coming back from Babylon. Nothing like that happened. There was no big to do, and certainly the glory of the Lord did not come back, and He was not dwelling in that temple. So, um, they did have their um, problems there. And so anyway, they said, "Well, how have you loved them?" Well, here God says, "Okay, you remember Esau and Jacob? Wasn't Esau Jacob's brother? And I loved Jacob, but Esau I hated." All right, now what does that mean that you hated? One you hated and the other one you loved. All right, that is an idiomatic phrase that's in translated into English. It just doesn't sit well. Okay, so um, what we have here is um, it's a comparison. He said, "I loved Jacob, but Esau I hated." Well, God doesn't hate people like that. He may hate their actions and so forth, but it's just God is not, he's a God of love, but he's also a God of discipline and so forth. So, but it was the comparison about how much God loved Jacob as opposed to how much he loved Esau, and there was no comparison, because he loved Jacob, well, way over on this side, and he loved Esau just a little bit over here. All right. So, but is not emotional hatred. It was covenantal preference. And it's often in the Hebrew idiom, it's expressed as the choice or rejection. I think you could possibly even say, when Yeshua in Matthew 5:17, he says, I did not come to abolish the law, but I came to fulfill it. And two completely different things. You could have said, it's not exactly the same, but it's that idea of extremes. All right. And so Jacob and Esau, shoot, they were equal candidates. They came from the same womb, the same father, same lineage, everything was the same. But God chose one and not the other. And so there was nothing in Jacob that made him more deserving or anything. It was just God's choice. And so we got to remember that God's choice of the Jewish people was pure grace, had nothing to do with them being better than anybody else. And in fact, they may have been a little bit more stinkers than the rest of the world. So, but that's who God chose. That's who God chose. Okay. Somebody, let's see. That must be Mike.
Yeah,
Is
so
that you, Mike? Okay.
yeah, I'm outside where it's safe. Okay, so to hate, I've heard it expressed as to love less or love differently. When Yeshua is speaking in the Gospels about hating your mom, hating your dad, hating your brother, your sister, and
Exactly.
following after him, it's to love them less than him. And when he said he loved Jacob but hated Esau, would that mean he just loved him less or differently? I guess he doesn't love less or more, but would he be loved differently?
It could very well be loving differently, and at the same time, what it is, it's just a matter of extremes.
Okay.
Like I really, really like, say, vanilla ice cream. Okay, I'm a fan of just plain old vanilla ice cream, especially if it's Bluebell. All right. And so I'm not at all a fan of, let's say, some of these ones where they put nuts and fruits and all kinds of stuff in. When I was growing up, we'd get together with our families and we'd have an ice cream social, all of the aunts and uncles and cousins and everything. And inevitably, somebody would have to make banana nut ice cream. And to me, I just thought that was a terrible waste of cream and sugar to make put bananas in your ice cream. That's just gross to me. But my dad and mother, they just loved it. All our aunts and uncles, they just thought that was the grandest thing. So was it good? I don't know. A lot of people thought it was good, but so I could say, yeah, I love um, um, homemade vanilla ice cream, and I hate banana nut ice cream. I don't hate it. It's just that I don't like it as well as I like my plain old vanilla ice cream. And that's about as best I can do to describe that. Okay. It wasn't a real good description now that's come out of my mouth. I said, okay, that wasn't very good at all. But maybe you get the point of what that means. And so I think we can look at Edom as I call it a living parable, a living example, because God said, "But Esau I hated, and I made his mountains, his living area a desolation, and gave him, uh, his the animals out there were just jackals and wolves and coyotes and stuff like that." Um, so I guess you could say Edom had become a historical illustration of what life outside the covenant looks like. And so, anyway, that's what they're talking about there. All right, I got to get going here on some more, see if we can get through this tonight. Verses 4 and 5. For Edom may say, "We have been beaten down, but we will return and rebuild the ruins. Thus says Adonai Svaot, that they may rebuild it, but I will tear it down. They will be called a wicked territory, the people Adonai denounced forever. So you will see and you will say, May Adonai be magnified beyond the border of Israel." All right, so the story here is that he continues on and says, "Well, I hated Esau. Edom is another name for Esau." And so God was, he compared the two. He's going to destroy Edom. He's going to build up Israel, even though Israel was going to have to go through discipline and judgment and punishment. They were still going to be restored. Now, Edom, on the other hand, Esau was defiant. He was just a knucklehead. And so God said, "No, I don't want anything to do with this." And so they just kind of pushed him away, rejected him. Now, and then someday, in contrast to Edom, Israel is going to be exalted and promoted to be the head of all the nations of the world in the millennial period. That's what we're going to see with Israel, as that is going to be the premier nation of all in the millennial period. Okay, so and the Edom would say, "Well, I'm going to rebuild my ruins," and God said, "Yeah, go ahead. I'll just destroy them again." This is a permanent judgment against Edom, and it's going to be a permanent judgment against the nations. The nations they could come out after God slays them all at Armageddon. They could come back and say, "Well, we'll rebuild and we'll go at it again." Well, and they will at the end of the millennial period. They're going to come against God again. He said, "It won't make any difference. I'll just defeat you again. It's no big deal to me." And so when the Lord makes up his mind, that's that's that. Okay, now I made up this little what do you call it, table here to just talking about how if this was a court of law and they were arguing over the covenant, then this would be you could put it in there like that. With Israel, it says, "How do you have loved us?" And that there was a function of accusing um, God of neglect. How can you say you loved us? Look, we just went through 70 years of this stuff, and now we come back here, and all they can do is come back to Israel and the kvetch. They're complaining about everything. Well, then the Lord says, "Hey, listen, you know, what about Esau, Jacob's brother? I love Jacob, not so much Esau." And so um, he was trying to go back to the history of the peoples, And then they said, well, Edom's going to rebuild. Well, no, God says, no, this you're not. This is sovereign judgment. You're not going to be rebuilt. And so at the end, the Lord says, your eyes will see, and great is Adonai's or Hashem's, great is Hashem beyond Israel's borders. So you're going to see that God is respected and revered well outside of Israel. All right, verse 6. A son honors his father and his servant, or his master. So if I am father, where's my honor? If I am master, where's my reverence? What Adonai says, Adonai Svaot, you, Kohanim, who despise my name, but you say, how do we despise your name? Okay, so verse 6 is kind of a pivot point here. And he's moving away from talking to the people. Now he's talking to the priests. The priests were the leaders. The priests were the spiritual leaders that were supposed to be following following what the Lord tells them, what they should be doing, and then bringing that to the people, so that they were the liaison, the go-betweens of the people and God. And so this is, God was not, the priests were not honoring God in their service. They just did sloppy, haphazard work. And so the Lord said, I'm just not, I don't like this. And, it shifted from that opening statement of God's declaration of love, and now we're coming to the formal charges against Israel's leadership. And so, but then the priests, they're kind of defiant there. They says, oh yeah, how have we defiled despised your name? And so they're going back with their own accusation and denial and all of that. So the priests, they were entrusted with guarding holiness, and now they've become the defendants because God is coming against them. And so God speaking through Malachi says, look, a son honors his father, and a servant fears his master. Those are two universal things. Nobody would disagree with that. But they were binding relational obligations. And so he says, that's the way it is. But if I'm your father, then how come you're not honoring me like a normal son would be honoring his father? Why are you not doing that? Where's my honor? And so the it was a very severe accusation against the priests, and so they came back and says, well, how have we despised your name? And so the Lord I think he was very patient with these guys, because every time that he would tell them one thing, then they would come back with a question. And but what it does, it just revealed their own spiritual blindness, their sense of their self-justification, and their conscience was seared in many cases. And so there was a disconnect between the ritual activity that they were doing, all the sacrifices and the blowing the trumpets and doing all the things that they did, and covenant loyalty, because they were not keeping covenant. They were using, animals that should not have been used. And so they were violating the covenant God made with the people. And so here the central idea here is the name of God. And so they were not honoring the name of God, the character of God, that who God was. And so people they were supposed to magnify the name of God to the people, but they weren't doing it. They were actually diminishing it. And so we see that the priests were kind of a mirror for the nation. The way that the priests went, pretty much so did the people. All right, verses 7 and 8. But by offering defile bread on my altar. That's how you despise my name. But you say, how did we defile you? When you say the table of Adonai is despicable, when you bring a blind one as sacrifice, is it not wrong? Or when you bring a lamb or sick one, is it not wrong? Offer them now to your governor. Would he be pleased with you, or will he acknowledge you favorably? Says Adonai Zvaot. Okay, so what he's saying here is that they've gotten so lackadaisical with their worship that they didn't even they had no standard of holiness. They were looking at Torah as just, yeah, something we got to do, and but it's I'm not really into it, and they didn't follow the rules because it was uh it was tough to follow the rules. They didn't like to follow the rules because then they'd have to do more work and do stuff. But they treated God as just something as common, that they didn't have to do anything special with the sacrifices. Just, yeah, any old lamb will do. And a lot of times, they used lambs that were stolen or defective or something, so they gave them up in the sacrifices, because then that way they would keep the good lambs for themselves. So um, and they honored the authorities more than they did God. So, and he asked, says, would you take these kind of offerings to the governor and give him something that was defective? No, you wouldn't. So, why are you doing that to God? And so, this would you could say that Malachi uh, 1:6. Well, I've already done 1:6 and 7, that they were, it was an appeal for them to get back on board. All right. So let's all right. So let me here. I'm at 9 and 10. Okay. Get to my notes here. So now, 9 and 10. So now implore God's favor, then will he be gracious to us. Since this has come from your hands, will he accept any of it from you? Says Adonai Svaot. If just one of you would shut the doors and not light my altar uselessly, I have no delight in you, says Adonai Svaot, nor will I accept any offering from you. Okay, so what we got here, this is kind of these two verses are kind of an emotional and a theological climax of the first dispute, where he's going against the priest for their attitude and just the way that they're doing stuff. And so they had so polluted all of the offerings that it made God sick. And so now he says, yeah, well, come and uh, ask God for a favor. And so this is where I look at it and I said, well, that's pretty sarcastic, where they've been um, they've been going against God for a while, and then now they're saying, well, we really need, he's telling, come to the Lord for mercy and come to the Lord for a favor. And so how can you expect favor from the Lord when you've been disrespecting him this whole time? And so they're there's a Hebrew word here, or Hebrew phrase, hilu panei el, which um, it carries a sense of appeasing or soften or seek graces. But the idea of it was a very um, ironic or sarcastic tone. He says, how can you go to the Lord when you're despising him, and you're just showing by your sacrifice you don't even like it, you don't follow him or anything. The priests were supposed to guard the holiness and teach Torah, all of that, but they did nothing. And so he's not going to take anything from their hand. He doesn't want to take a sacrifice from them. And he says, would there be just one guy could I have with just one good man that would shut the door and put a halt to this stuff? And so it was kind of an appeal to, let's have just one good man to jump in there and kind of stop this stuff that's going on. So let's get to 11 and 12. For from sunrise to its setting, my name will be great among the nations, and in every place incense will be offered to my name with a pure grain offering. For my name will be great among the nations, said Adonai Svaot. But you are profaning it when you say the table of Adonai is defiled, and as for its fruit, its food despicable. All right, so what we have here is that the Lord is saying, okay, it's a shock verse, a shock statement, where he's saying now that you know, my name is going to be revered all over the world. Not so much here in Israel because you're despising my name. That's okay. The rest of the world is going to come out and revere the name and hold up and lift up the name of God. And so they're going to honor the Lord, whereas Israel is not. And so that's got to be, kind of a something that Israel would have to look at very, very seriously, because they're supposed to be God's chosen people, and yet if God is going out and the nations are honoring Him as their God, then what does that do for the Jewish people? And so it was a thing that they had to. It was basically this was the two by four up against their head there to get their attention, to where he says, "Okay, that's all right. I will go and get my praise other places." In Psalms 113:3, it says, "From the rising of the sun to its setting, the name of the Lord is to be praised." And so Isaiah 66, where it's talking about nations bringing offerings to Jerusalem, and Zephaniah 2:11, or Zephaniah 2:11, nations worshiping the Lord. And so each one of those, the point is the same. God's glory is not limited to Israel's borders, and Israel's failure does not diminish his honor. And so let's go to the last two verses, and we'll close it down. You also say, it's so tedious, and you sniff at it, says Adonai Svaot. So you bring plunder, the lame and the sick, then you bring them as the offering. Should I accept this from your hand, says Adonai? Moreover, cursed is a deceiver who has in his flock a male, but makes a vow and sacrifices something blemished to my Lord. For I am a great king, says Adonai Svaot, and my name shall be revered among the nations. Okay, so
Rabbi,
yes, sir.
Rabbi, just a quick note on you said, because it says where it says sniff there. It's that is the Hebrew verb nefach, and I don't know if you can see my face when I do this, but it's kind of like a very disdainful, like like maybe like who cares? It's like it's like it's just making it. It's just really dissing God. So
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
I just forgot. I just share that real quick.
Good. That's a good way of looking at it. And so what we have here is that these priests they're so I use the word calloused. They're just not with it. They don't have a spirit of worship in them. They're just going through the motions because they're um, it's like we see in employment in companies sometimes, where people they will do just the bare minimum to keep them from getting fired and being able to still get a paycheck at the end of the pay period. You see that in government service all the time. It says, "Hey, I'm a civil servant. You can't fire me," and that's kind of the way some of these priests were. They were going through the motions. They had no heart in it, and they kept substituting poor quality animals for the sacrifices and keeping the good stuff, whereas that's totally against what God was saying. And basically, God says, "Okay, look, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take your sacrifices, and I don't like it." And so we got to that. We're at that point now where, okay, stand by, because there's more to come in chapter 2. And we'll see in chapter 2, I think from 1 to 9, where they're talking about more of what the priests do. So that covers the class for tonight. I apologize, we went a little bit over, but I did want to get this chapter out of the way, and then we'll look at 2 next week and 3 the following week. Any comments or questions before we shut her down tonight? Okay, nobody's going to jump on that wagon. All right, so then I will stop the share. Okay, and then somebody, okay. Okay, Randy, yeah, if you're looking at that, Randy had a sewage and water leak in their apartment building. And from what I understand, somebody drank the water that was contaminated with the sewage, and he died.
Oy,
Now,
oy, oy.
yeah, and so I can't even imagine how it would happen that quickly. But anyway, so Randy says, yeah, everything is good, and they've got uh, good water now. I'd still boil my water there, Randy, for a little while till they get all that stuff taken care of. All right, so I'm going to shut down the